Welcome back to Shadowy Stories. This was supposed to be a normal vacation, a chance for me to relax and focus on my writing. I can't comprehend why these insane things could be real. I made a mistake, a huge one. I accidentally unleashed something, and I have no idea the extent of its threat. If it's free to roam, things could get much worse. All I can do now is document what happened, hoping it serves as a warning to anyone who might hear this tale. Whatever you do, don't go exploring. Don't go near that lake, stay away from it. It all happened during my first extended vacation in 5 years. I'm an insurance broker for a private insurance firm. Due to my strong performance, I almost always have to work overtime. I enjoy writing fiction, but with barely any time off for weeks. I didn't have time to pursue any hobbies or interests. This also meant extended vacations were pretty much impossible. But a stroke of luck, coupled with some bad luck, allowed me to take an extended leave. The bad luck I'm referring to is my health. Perhaps a foreshadowing of things to come, possibly from all the long hours without a break. My brain couldn't handle the strain, and I suffered a minor stroke, forcing me to take medical leave. This gave me the freedom I hadn't had in years. Albeit due to illness, it was a long overdue break. I decided to rent a cabin by a lake. I'd been writing fiction for a few years now, and although I didn't have much time to write, I had plenty of ideas. I was excited to finally be able to put them down on paper. I planned to stay at the cabin for a week. I arrived early Saturday morning. As I drove in, I was delighted by the beauty that unfolded before me. It had been a long drive, but a breathtakingly beautiful one. The place was called Lake Cop, and the scenery was magnificent. The lake is stunning azure blue. I pulled up near the cabin and saw it for the first time. The house was small, but perfect for me, just the kind of cabin I needed to do some writing. I grabbed my suitcase, which only contained a few changes of clothes and toiletries, and my laptop, hoping I'd get a good amount of writing done. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through some saved screenshots of my chat logs with the owner, finding the code to unlock the door. I was thankful I'd taken screenshots. The biggest downside of this place was the lack of cell service. Walking up the driveway towards the cabin, I noticed other houses nestled within the trees on either side of mine. It seemed I had neighbors. I reached the door, entered the code, and tried to open it, but to no avail. I tried 3 more times, with no success. The thing seemed jammed. I double-checked the code on my phone, but it still wouldn't open. I thought about calling the owner, only to remember the lack of cell service. My shoulders slumped in defeat, feeling as though I'd have to get a refund and go home. That's when I heard someone call out from behind me, "Excuse me, I think you have to hold the last button down when you pull the latch. Their locks always get stuck." I've seen guests leave before because they couldn't get in. I'd been so flustered I'd even forgotten to say hello. Instead, I just mechanically entered the numbers one last time, following her instructions, and just like that the lock opened. A writer's block. "I might take you up on that offer," I joked, glad to have such a friendly face to greet me here. "Thanks again for helping me with the door." I smiled. Emily waved goodbye and headed back down the driveway toward her cabin. I waved back, happy to have met her. I didn't know if I'd have the courage to invite her over like she hinted, but I could at least entertain the fantasy. I opened the door and dragged my luggage inside. The cabin had a slightly musty smell. I wasn't sure how long it had been since the last guest or how often it was cleaned. It wasn't particularly dirty, just dusty, as if the place hadn't been occupied for a while. The decor inside was nautical themed, with pictures of fishermen, sea creatures, and ships adorning the walls and furniture. I felt it was a bit on the nose, but charming nonetheless. Further into the house, I saw a small bathroom where I placed the toilet reside. There was a bedroom to the left of the entryway, a small kitchen straight ahead, and finally, a small living room with a fireplace, chairs, and a sofa to the right. Through sliding glass doors was a patio that offered a wonderful view of the lake. I knew at that moment that this is where I wanted to write. I opened the sliding doors, and a soothing breeze rolled in from the lakeshore. I was already feeling much better. I set my suitcase down on the living room floor and grabbed my laptop, setting it on the patio table and sat down to start writing my novel. I barely noticed time passing, and if not for the orange glow of the setting sun, I wouldn't have known it was getting late. I had been sitting there all day and barely taken a break. I was starving. While it was good I was focused on my writing, being too engrossed and forgetting to take breaks was a bad habit. With the last of the natural light almost gone, I decided to get something to eat. I realized I hadn't brought any food with me, so I scavenged around the kitchen for something. It wasn't much, just some canned soup and a box of crackers, enough to get by for tonight. I figured I would drive back towards the nearest town tomorrow to pick up some groceries. As I ate my soup in silence, my gaze shifted towards the lake. The view was stunning. It looked as if the sun was sinking below the water, the remaining daylight slowly fading from view. I sat there, pleased with the progress I had made that day and looking forward to the rest of my vacation. I was about to get up and grab my luggage from the living room when I saw a large swell of water appear near the center of the lake. Like a mini whirlpool of sorts, it vanished almost as soon as it appeared. I rubbed my eyes in disbelief, trying to make sure I had seen what I thought I had as I continued to look down. I thought I saw a strange mist rise from the surface of the water, and, in the direction the moon was rising, I saw an incredibly brief flash of light. It was a very mysterious and captivating sight, but somewhat unnerving. I decided not to think too much of it and do a little more writing in the living room before going to bed. I closed my laptop and turned off the lights. As I lay in bed waiting to fall asleep, I noticed a multitude of ambient sounds. The rhythmic chirping of frogs, the calls of owls in the darkness, just to name a few. I also recall waking up sometime around midnight to a strange silence. The previously ambient sounds were gone. I was about to drift back to sleep when I heard something peculiar. It was faint but distinct. A sound somewhat akin to wind chimes colliding with each other at irregulars. The sounds themselves weren't jarring, but there was a strange delay between them, seeming somewhat unnatural. Worst of all, during the gaps in the sound, there was a strange pressure in the air that caused a dull ache in my head. I tried to ignore it and go back to sleep, but it was impossible. It was as if the more I ignored it, the more noticeable it became. I pulled my pillow over my head and tossed and turned for a few minutes before eventually deciding to get up and see what was causing the noise. I hoped it had a source and wasn't some form of tinnitus brought on by my stroke. I was supposed to be relaxing, but writing so much today made it feel like a workday. Despite my apprehension, curiosity got the better of me, and I began to get up to look for the source of the strange sound. The room was pitch black, and I fumbled around for the light switch so I could see. Before I found the light, I noticed a strange source of light outside, a luminescence emanating from the lake. But unlike the usual light ripples one would see under a moonlit sky, it seemed to be emanating from the lake itself. I turned on the light and closed my eyes for a moment, just in case my eyes didn't adjust well to the sudden transition from darkness to light. In the moment my eyes were closed, I began to listen more carefully, and I heard the rattling sound again, this time clearer, and it sounded like it was coming from below, perhaps under the floorboards. I thought that was odd. Wind chimes usually required wind to make a sound, but the more I listened, the more it sounded like it was coming from underneath the room. I realized I could now distinctly make out individual chimes as if they were a set. I remembered seeing a small access panel under the patio and decided to see if there was a crawl space or some other place where I could take a look without having to move any of the floor tiles, as damaging those might cause trouble with the owner if I turned up nothing. I went outside, and a wave of bone-chilling cold washed over me. I regretted not grabbing a jacket. I quickly went over to the side of the patio and, after removing a small access panel, found an opening that I could crawl into to investigate. I started to go in but immediately recoiled, startled nearly half to death. Way to scare yourself. I chuckled to myself, realizing I had just noticed a small group of deer a short distance away. And I wasn't sure why they were so close but hadn't run off yet. They seemed to be in a trance-like state, almost as if they didn't care what I was doing, or perhaps they'd heard the sound I bent over and squeezed myself through the opening. The sound was getting much clearer, almost as if the closer I got to it, the louder it became as I slowly crawled through a damp and cold tunnel. I began to regret this little adventure. The tunnel was filled with old cobwebs and decaying debris, a mix of both plant and biological matter. The sound was hammering away at my head, and I worried it might be doing me actual harm, but I was already too far in. I might as well commit. I'd been searching and feeling around in the darkness for some time when my hand brushed against something different. It felt like a small box of some kind. It felt almost unreal and strangely warm to the touch. The moment I fully grasped the box, the high-pitched sound nearly split my head open, and I started crawling backwards, eager to get out so I could see it more clearly. The second time I touched it, it had quieted down, but I realized the sound hadn't gone away entirely. As I came out of the cramped space and dusted myself off, the ringing came back. I held the box up to the light, and it was a strange one. Impressively adorned with hand-carved depictions of various sea creatures. The clasp looked like it was made from the teeth of some kind of sea creature. Maybe even a shark or something. It seemed to be hand-carved from some type of ivory. Although the color and texture were somewhat different, I couldn't tell for sure what it was made of. I undid the small clasp and slowly opened it, revealing a strange object. It looked like some kind of contraption, but made from a mixture of metal and some type of sea coral. The thing was mesmerizing, and I wondered who put it there, why it was there, and why it made that strange sound. It had a clicking gem-like quality to it, and I had no idea what for power the sounds it made. I wanted to go back inside and examine it further, and I turned to head back. Almost the moment I turned my back to the lake, the thing began making an out-of-control whirring sound, sharp enough to make my teeth hurt. I turned back around and felt a strange compulsion to throw it away. I noticed as I faced the lake, however, that sensation lessened, and as I walked in that direction, the sound became softer and more soothing, which I found to be very strange. It quickly dawned on me that somehow this small object could change its sound and frequency based on its direction and proximity to the lake. I tested this a few more times. When I moved away from the lake, it whined as if in protest, and when I moved closer towards the lake's edge, it returned to making comforting and soothing sounds. The thing was fascinating. It functioned almost like a divining rod of sorts, and I didn't know how it made the sound it did. I was exhausted, so I went inside, thinking I would investigate it further tomorrow. But even though I left it on the patio, it still wouldn't stop making this unbearably loud whining sound, almost as if it was crying out to go towards the lake, making it impossible to sleep. Then I made the fateful choice to carry it toward the lake's edge. As I got closer, it continued with the soothing, pleasant music it played. I could feel a strange pulsating sensation as I held it, which unsettled me somewhat, like the heartbeat of some kind of animal. I eventually reached the lake's edge. The strange object seemed to be filled with some unseen energy, glowing faintly. I glanced up towards the lake's edge and, to my shock, I saw the same light emanating from the water of the lake. I started to have concerns about the object I was holding and fantasized about it possibly having some kind of radiation that would make me sick. It couldn't be natural. The light was from under the water, not a reflection from the surface. My mind was filled with concerns. The strange sounds, the pulsating sensation, and everything else that had been going on in the past hour. I stood there motionless at the water's edge, contemplating the strangeness of the situation. Suddenly something snapped me out of my trance, and I realized I didn't like holding this thing so close to the lake. As I turned to leave, I slipped in a patch of mud and fell face first into the dirt, the object falling from my hand and sliding into the water with a splash. I quickly got up and lunged forward, attempting to retrieve it, but I was too late. The water had already carried it away towards the deeper parts of the lake. I watched as the light it emitted streaked across the water's surface into the deepest part of the lake. I observed the phenomenon from the shore as the strange trinket floated rapidly through the water, glowing brightly and constantly clicking and pulsing as it neared the center of the lake. I would have expected it to continue to drift, perhaps towards the opposite shore, yet somehow it came to a complete stop in the center of the lake. It floated there, motionless, only visible by the light it continually emitted. Then there was a rumbling, akin to an avalanche, followed by the terrifying sound of cracking rock. Like the plates of the earth shifting after some time, the light vanished from view, and the lake's surface grew calm again. I didn't know what I had just witnessed. The strange trinket was gone, swallowed by the lake. Why did the light vanish? The strange sound stop. I sat there by the lake for a while, both bewildered and unsettled, unable to make sense of anything. I decided to just go back to the cabin and rest. I slept fitfully that night, dreaming of strange lights in the lake and rhythmic clicking and humming. Something felt wrong. I had the sinking feeling that dropping the contraption into the lake had been a terrible mistake. I had never been one to believe that dreams could be prophetic, but now, I was very much afraid of what my dreams foretold. I woke up much later in the morning, groggy and barely able to tell which way was up. I felt terrible. I knew I hadn't slept enough, but I couldn't fall back asleep, so I decided to make a pot of coffee in the kitchen to help with my mental fatigue. As I was about to go to the kitchen, there was a knock at my door. I wasn't sure who it was, thinking perhaps Emily was paying me a visit. I tried to comb my hair back to make myself somewhat presentable, but there were no mirrors to check. I must have looked awful after last night. I was dreading answering the door but couldn't think of an excuse, so I forced myself to open it, bracing for their gaze. What I didn't expect was a short man with white hair and large round glasses to greet me at the door. The man eyed me critically, then cleared his throat before speaking. "Excuse me, sir. I understand you are the guest occupying this cabin, but I must ask, did you see or hear anything strange last night? Because this morning I found something dreadful between our two cabins, and I think you should see it." He paused, readjusting his spectacles. "Sorry. My name is John. I live next door. I saw this place was rented out, so I figured I should come warn you." I introduced myself, and as I spoke, I noticed his eyes darting around, especially in the vicinity of the small patio area. "Well, I suppose it's better you see for yourself." He gestured for me to follow him, which I did. We walked halfway down the path between my cabin and John's house, and as we approached a cluster of small trees near the shore, I was met with a shocking sight. It was the mangled remains of what looked like several deer. They had been utterly torn apart. Strewn across the area were bits of blood, fur, and bone. It was savage. I didn't know who or what could do this. As far as I was aware, there was no animal that would be this brutal. I just stood there looking at the grisly scene when John spoke again. "I found this while taking my morning walk by the lake. We get bears occasionally, even mountain lions once, but I've never seen anything this bad. I don't even know what killed them. Was it hunting or was it killing? There is so much of their remains left, scattered everywhere, not eaten." I was so shocked I barely heard a word he said. This was the same group of deer I had seen yesterday. The thing that killed them was this close to the cabins. My thoughts raced as dread started to set in. "Are you all right, sir?" John said, sounding somewhat concerned. "I'm so sorry. You're right. That's awful. I didn't see any other animals besides those deer last night. They seemed fine at the time." I decided not to mention the strange sounds, lights in the lake, and the object, as I was skeptical of everything myself and wasn't 100% sure it wasn't a dream. "Well, look here, fella, you be careful. Whatever did this to those deer didn't leave a single track, and something this vicious, to kill so quickly, so wantonly, is not to be trifled with, you understand?" I nodded my head and thanked him for his concern. Then he walked off the path, looking left and right, a bit paranoid. I couldn't blame him. I thought this was a very concerning coincidence. These animals being mutilated on the same night, all that crazy stuff with the sounds and lights happened, whatever it was. I didn't like it. I was about to head back inside when Emily called out to me, waving me over from a distance. When I reached her, she also seemed to be in a state of shock. "Yeah, John gave me the same warning. Whatever that was, it's terrifying. I don't even know if I should tell my Aunt Martha. She loved those deer. She's going to be heartbroken," she said somberly, looking over towards her house, then turning back to me. "Oh, sorry, I didn't mention yesterday, but I live with my Aunt Martha. She's the one who raised me after my parents passed away. She's always been fond of animals. The ducks, the deer, squirrels, all sorts of animal friends she's made here. She isn't doing well health-wise, but she is going to take the news about the deer hard. I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do to help? I asked. No. It's fine, thank you for asking. Just be careful, and if you see or hear anything strange, just yell. It's probably best to stay indoors at night, not wander about taking late-night strolls like last night, she said, winking at me as she made her way back towards her house. Did she see something last night too? I wondered how much she saw or if she heard the strange chimes from the object or the eerie glow from the lake. I didn't know what to do at that point, so I figured I should just drive to town and grab some groceries. A few hours later, I returned to the cabin with food, drinks, and a few random items I decided to pick up while there. I was a little shaken by the mutilated deer, the image fresh in my mind reminding me of how vulnerable I was. I didn't have the funds nor the time to purchase a firearm, so just in case, I grabbed a can of bear spray and a hunting knife. I also bought a mirror, as I found myself caring about my appearance more on this trip than I thought I would. I had to admit, I wanted to at least indirectly impress Emily, so I grabbed the mirror, a comb, and a few other things, trying to spruce myself up. I went inside, wanting to get in a few more hours of writing before it got dark, but I struggled to focus. My thoughts kept drifting back to the strange lights in the lake, and I wondered what was really going on here. Frustrated, I hadn't even written a single complete paragraph, so I decided to just call it a day and hope to get a decent night's sleep. Since I'd been tossing and turning all night the previous night, I fell asleep quickly this time. However, several hours later, I was awoken by a blood-curdled scream. I bolted upright, jumping out of bed and scrambling in the dark, nearly tripping over myself. Strangely, I felt like I was prepared, almost as if I subconsciously knew something would happen. I ran outside in just my boxers and a t-shirt, grabbing my flashlight and bear spray, forgetting to grab the knife. But there was no time to go back now. The weather was frigid, and I regretted not being dressed properly, but it didn't matter right now if someone was in dire need of help. I looked around, trying to pinpoint the source of the scream. I glanced towards the lake and was horrified to see an eerie mist gathering around the lakeshore. Looking closer, it appeared to be the same soft color as the water in the lake from the other night. I was certain now, everything that was happening was related. I paused to listen for a moment and heard the distinct sounds of shattering glass and splintering, wood coming from what sounded like Emily and her aunt's direction. I sprang into action, sprinting down the darkened pathway, nearly tripping several times. I had to get there quickly. Something was happening. Something bad. When I reached their house, I saw the back door screen had been ripped from its hinges. The glass of the back door was shattered, and there was a horrifying gash in the door itself, as if a massive claw had ripped through my grip on the bear sprayed iron. I forced myself to go in. As I stepped into the house, my head started buzzing, my teeth almost chattering. I didn't know where Emily or her aunt might be. I hadn't heard either of their voices, but I heard something else, something worse. It sounded like some kind of giant stomping or dragging its feet. There was a behemoth moving about within the house. I dropped to the floor, pressing myself against the wall in the darkness. I thought I heard something moving upstairs. I held my breath and peeked around the corner just as a table was smashed against the wall. I cringed at the explosive destruction as I peered again. It was even darker in the room. I saw a floor lamp on the floor broken. Holding my breath, I watched, or I should say stared blankly, as I realized the thing was still there. I could hear it, but not see it. There was nothing visible besides the wreckage, but the sounds were horrifying. I felt a pulsating pain in my head as I heard that familiar humming again from the other night. There was a surging, crushing, flapping sound, as if a tree was being dragged across the floor. The wood in the house was bending and flexing as the monstrosity moved across the floor. My mind racing, I knew I had to do something. I was terrified to proceed further, but I had to try to make sure Emily and her aunt were safe. Even if I could just distract whatever it was, maybe give them time to escape. My planning was interrupted by another sound from upstairs. I heard a tremendous crash and the banister of the stairway snapped from some kind of massive force. I gulped and rushed upstairs after a short pause. In case there was more to come, I arrived just in time to hear Emily scream. She had been crying, sobbing uncontrollably as I got to the top of the stairs and entered the living room area. I noticed one of the bedrooms. They must have been hiding there. Emily was huddled in a corner of the room, holding an older-looking woman who must have been her Aunt Martha. The poor woman was still alive, her limbs torn off, and there was a spray of blood, and the blood seemed to glow and splash, being absorbed by the unseen entity that was attacking her. I took a step back and sat by the doorway, taking deep breaths, trying to focus on the insanity that was unfolding. If I didn't act fast, Emily would be next. So I grabbed a loose piece of wood from the railing and threw it down the stairs as hard as I could. The thing paused. Everything instantly fell silent except for Emily's low, choke sobs. Trying to shy away from the thing that had taken her aunt's life might have worked, I thought. But I wanted a closer look to see if anything moved in the room so I could gauge where it might be standing. I pulled out the pocket mirror I had purchased earlier and held it near the corner of the door, using it to look around and see what was happening. I choked back a gasp of terror as I looked, barely managing to contain myself from giving away my position, although invisible to the naked eye. Through the mirror's reflection, I saw its true form and my heart almost stopped. I had to hold my breath. The horror and strangeness of this monster were beyond description. It writhed and pulsed with oily, claw-like fur limbs, residual tendrils and antennae intertwining amongst themselves where its eyes should have been. Massive tubular appendages grew, enveloped in the same type of light I had seen on the lake. I stared at the monster's reflection, paralyzed with fear. The thing shifted its form toward Emily. She was trapped. If I didn't intervene, she would surely die. I forced myself to move, rushing into the room with an almost suicidal courage I didn't think I had, using the mirror as a guide. I watched where the massive abomination stood, and as it turned towards us, I began spraying the bear spray where the eyes should have been. A horrifying rumble and a surge of nausea filled my stomach. I thought I heard sounds both near and far, blending together until I felt like I was about to pass out. I rushed over and grabbed Emily. "We have to go now," I yelled at her, trying to get her to move. The approach seemed to work, snapping her out of her catatonic fear. "Where did it go? What was that?" "It killed Aunt Martha," she said, almost delirious. "It's still here. We have to run now." I heard a loud crash as a bookshelf fell off the wall but didn't see its source. We ran along the edges of the room, staying far away from where I last saw it. The rumbling sound started to subside, and I didn't know if that meant it had recovered from the bear spray and would be attacking us again. Nor did I have time to figure it out. We ran out of the room and Emily screamed again. She had seen it too. There was a small portion of the room's window that hadn't shattered from the monster's roars, and the reflective surface was just enough to get a glimpse of it. We saw the fetid monstrosity slowly move, trying to follow us out of the room. That was enough for us both to frantically rush out of the house and into the front yard. We didn't look back, although I could tell Emily really wanted to, as this was where she grew up, her house, and the aunt who raised her. I held her hand firmly, trying to reassure her. "I'm so sorry she's gone, but you'll make it through this. You'll make it. We both will. We have to go." She nodded curtly, and I could see her reluctantly agreeing. "You're right. I just can't believe this is happening." "What was that thing?" "I don't know, and we don't have time to figure it out." We get to my car and we leave. We bolted down the path toward my cabin. We had just made it onto the path when we heard a thunderous crash from behind us, as if a wrecking ball had building. We knew it had made its way out. We began running down the path, and as we went down the slight decline, I tripped, tumbling and nearly falling down the other side of the hill towards the lake's edge. Emily helped me back up. I thanked her, but I could barely speak as I saw the trees behind us being pushed over, some outright snapping as the thing pursued us. Nothing was visible besides the snapping and bending trees and the horrifying surging, slithering sound it made. We reached the car, and my heart sank as I realized the keys were inside the house. What is it? Come on, let's go, Emily pleaded, desperate fear stinging her normally calm voice. The keys are inside, I admitted dejectedly, telling her follow me. And whatever is in that room gets to the car. We burst into the cabin and I scrambled around the room for the keys. The joy of finding them was short-lived as we heard the walls of the room being smashed and pummeled by the creature. We thought we were done for. When we heard gunshots from outside, the monster instantly ceased its assault on the cabin and 3 more shots followed, then yells. I grabbed the keys and rushed out the door just as I saw John being held in the air by some unseen force, still trying to fire his rifle at the thing. Run! John yelled desperately. He looked like he wanted to say something else. But we watched in horror as his head and body separated. Emily screamed again, and I grabbed her hand. We rushed to the car. I started the engine and peeled out of the driveway, taking one last look in the rearview mirror at something that would forever be burned into my nightmares. I saw the entire horrifying lakeside in the rearview mirror, glowing with infernal light which now seemed to be spreading to the land, accompanied by the rumbling, shuddering sounds of the monster that still echo in my mind today as we desperately fled the area, nearly insane. Emily and I drove until morning, nearly out of gas. We didn't know what to do or say. We were alive. But for how long? What had Lake Cop unleashed? Was it over? We haven't heard anything more from the area since, but we don't know what that means. Did it return to the lake to slumber once again? Or is its reign of terror just beginning? What I can tell you is, if you're going on vacation, be careful, and for heaven's sake, don't go anywhere near Lake Cop.